Alrighty, sorry about the late start. It took me like 15 minutes to write up the synopsis of what happened on previously. Also, technical issues, because why not? Anyway, welcome back to Wuxia Wednesdays. I'm your intrepid martial brother Fraggeth, and today we're going to be reading more from Legends of the Condor Heroes, Part 1, Book 1, A Hero Born by Jin Yong. Um, Previously on, a lot happened. There was nuclear war on the dance floor, or rather the inn/tavern, as the seven freaks/heroes of the South met with Qiu Chuji. Also, we had it revealed that Yan Lie is actually guy whose name I can't remember right now because my brain is having a terrible, terrible time. Um, I think it's Wanyan Honglie. Yeah, Wanyan Honglie. And he's actually a prince, I believe, of the Song Empire, who are not necessarily the good guys. They are frowned upon for purposes of this story. Come on. Where are you? Sorry, the Jin Empire, who wants to conquer the Song. He has ambitions for greatness. He is the sixth prince, titled the Prince of Zhao. He's made conquering the Song his personal mission. Um, yep, that's it. So he has kidnapped Charity Bao because she saved his life, and also he thinks she's pretty. Um, and has basically kidnapped her at this point, absconded with her under the guise of getting her away from all the murderous soldiers, which were his soldiers, basically. Um, so I can't remember if Charity knows at this point. I think she probably does. So the reason the Seven Freaks of the South are fighting with Qiu Chuji is because Qiu Chuji, the Taoist monk, has gone out and accused them of harboring kidnappers and their kidnap-ees. Um, he hasn't actually accused them of it, but he has accused Abbot Scorched Wood of keeping a man named Justice Duan hidden away from him and away from justice. Um, and Justice, the term, not the concept, not the actual person, whose nickname is Justice Duan. Um, he accuses Justice Duan of having kidnapped um, Lily Lee, who's the wife of the late Skyfury Guo from the beginning of the book, um, which is true, as it turns out. Um, but the Seven Freaks of the South are like, hey, bro, Abbot Scorched Wood is a cool dude. He wouldn't do this, not willingly, not knowingly rather. He is an honorable gentleman, and he would not do this thing. He would not harbor kidnappers at his temple. And if he did, he would certainly make sure that justice was sought out. And Qiu Chuji is like, no, I challenge you all to a drinking fight. Um, because you're not listening to me, because I'm not really making myself particularly clear or acting rational, because he's very impulsive. Um, and so they fight, um, and ultimately Justice Duan shows up and winds up killing Abbot Scorched Wood, the person who was hiding him there. And it turns out that Lily Lee has been disguised as a soldier the entire time. So the abbot had no idea. He was like, oh, I wondered why that young man looked so pretty. Now I know. As he dies, basically. Um, so that Yeah, Scorched Wood realized at once what had happened. This one small oversight had not only caused injury to himself, but also great harm to his friends. He planted his fist on the floor and, pushing himself to his feet, spread his hands and rushed at Justice Duan. Again, Duan managed to dive out of the way, but Scorched Wood's approach was clumsy, and he ran headfirst into one of the temple columns and was killed instantly. Justice Duan was terror-stricken. Justice Duan has already stabbed him at this point, so it's, he was probably going to die anyway. Justice Duan was terror-stricken. He could stay not a moment longer. Grabbing Lily Lee, he ran. Help! No! He's kidnapping me! Lily Lee's shouts faded into the distance. That gets us pretty much current. So yeah, a lot has happened over a fairly short interval of pages. Um, this will continue to be the case. I don't even know how I'm going to start on next week's, because a lot goes down this go round. So, we might as well get cracking on it. Alrighty, give me a sec to hydrate, and we'll get rocking and a-rolling. Chapter 3: Swirling Sands. 1. The monks sobbed bitterly at their abbot's death, but quickly turned to bandaging the wounded and carrying them to the temple guest house. A knocking from inside the bell in the hall suddenly interrupted their work. The monks looked at each other. Was it a monster? They began chanting the King's Sutra, accompanied by the mysterious banging. Eventually, some among them pulled the bell aside and together lifted the censer. To their horror, out rolled a ball of flesh. The monks jumped back in fright. The ball then slowly uncurled and stood up. It was Rider Han. He was unaware of how the fight had ended, but immediately spotted that Scorched Wood was at eternal rest and his martial family gravely injured. Taking up his golden dragon whip, he marched toward Qiu Chuji was lying and raised it above the Taoist's head. Third brother, no! Gildan Quan cried. Why not? You mustn't, was all his brother could manage through the pulsing pain in his stomach. Ke Zhene had been struck in both legs, but he was not badly hurt and was as alert as ever. He removed a vial of antidote from inside his shirt and instructed one of the monks to administer it to Qiu Chuji and Jade Han. He then explained all that had happened to his third martial brother. Where's Duan? Where is Duan? Rider Han demanded. We'll find the scoundrel soon enough, Ke Zhene replied. First you must help your brothers. They are badly wounded. Zhu Kong and Woodcutter Nan's injuries were the most serious, and the kick to Gildan Quan's stomach had done its damage too. Zhang Asheng's arm was broken, and his chest thumped with pain, but at least he was conscious once again. The monks sent runners to report the day's events to Withered Wood at Cloudy Perch Temple, and to start making arrangements for Abbot Scorched Wood's funeral. It took a few days for the poison to dissipate. Qiu Chuji was in fact well versed in the medicinal arts and spent his time mixing herbal recipes and giving massages to the freaks. Before long, they were able to sit up in bed. Together, they gathered in the monks' sleeping quarters. Eventually, Jade Han broke the silence. Elder Chu is wise and capable, and the seven freaks are not exactly amateurs. And yet this dog tricked us into turning on each other. If word gets out, we'll be laughed out of the Wulin. Your Reverence, she said, turning to Qiu Chuji, what do you think we should do? Qiu Chuji held himself very much responsible. If only he had spoken calmly with Scorched Wood, surely the truth would have come out. What do you think, Brother K? Zhene was short-tempered by nature, and had only become more so following the events which led to his being blinded. He considered the defeat of his martial family at the hands of the Taoist an event of unparalleled humiliation, and his leg was spasming with pain. His answer, therefore, was rather short. Elder Chu has no respect for anyone so long as he carries his sword. Why ask us our opinion? Oh, wait, no, that was Zhene. Elder Chu has no respect for anyone so long as he carries his sword. Why ask us our opinion? Qiu Chuji was stunned by this response, but understood Zhene's anger. He got to his feet and bowed to each in turn. Please forgive my ill manners. I have wronged each one of you. I beg for your forgiveness. Zhu Kong and the seven freaks bowed too, all except Zhene, who pretended not to notice. My martial brothers and I are no longer worthy of involving ourselves in matters of the martial world. We shall take to fishing or collecting firewood. As long as your reverence would be so good as to allow us a horse and leave us alone, we will live out the rest of our days in peace. Qiu Chuji blushed at Zhene's reproof. He sat stiffly, saying nothing, and then took to his feet. It was I who was at fault. I will not insult you further by wasting your time with my chatter. As for Abbot Scorched Wood's death, the responsibility is mine, and I will ensure that the villain Duan meets my blade. Now I must go. Qiu Chuji bowed once more and turned to leave. Wait! Zhene called after him. Qiu Chuji turned. Was there anything else, Brother K? You have caused each of us great injury, Zhene said. Is that all you have to say? What was Brother K hoping for? I will do everything in my power to please you. Your tone is most rude. You can't just expect us to swallow it, Zhene answered, his voice quiet. The seven freaks could be generous and just, but they were also afflicted by an exaggerated pride, bordering on arrogance. It was not for nothing that they were named the Seven Freaks, after all. As individuals they were accomplished, but together they were formidable. This was their first taste of defeat. Some years previously they triumphed over the, Huayang gang on the shores of the Yangtze River, defeating more than 100 men. Jade Han was only a child at the time, but she had killed 2. From that day on, their fame spread throughout the Jianghu. To be defeated by a lone Taoist was intolerable, all the more so that they were responsible for the death of their good friend Scorched Wood, and for no just cause. No, Qiu Chuji was to blame. He had been impetuous. Never mind that he had been right about a woman hiding in the temple. Skyfury Guo's wife, no less. Who they, I don't think, could have really known, but they were somewhat, Skyfury Guo and Ironheart Yang were martial heroes at one point, semi-famous. Patriots, anyway. Not exactly stupendous fighters, but up there. Oh, thanks for tuning in, Diggs BTW1. Welcome. Oh, that's... And then there's a Twitch bot. Hi, Twitch bot. How are things? No, I don't want your TwitchBot promotions. Goodbye. Be gone. Where were we? Oh, right. Qiu Chuji was to blame. He had been impetuous. Never mind that he had been right about a woman hiding in the temple. Skyfury Guo's wife, no less. I was gravely injured, Qiu Chuji said, and would have died had it not been for Brother K's antidote. So I must admit defeat this time. If that is so, Ke replied, then leave us the sword on your back as proof, so there can be no more fighting. Only Rider Han and Jade Han were fit for combat, and there was no way they could prevail alone. Ke would rather his martial brothers die by his own hand than by the Taoist's blade. I have saved them face by admitting defeat, Qiu Chuji said to himself. What else do they want? The sword is my protection, just like Brother K's staff. Are you ridiculing my condition? Ke raised his voice. Ke is blind. This was mentioned in the previous chapter, but only then. I wouldn't dare. Everyone is injured. We cannot fight again, Ke growled. But I invite your reverence to meet us back in the Garden of the 8 Drunken Immortals this very day, 1 year from now. Qiu Chuji frowned. Suddenly an idea hit him. Of course we can arrange another fight, but I should set the rules. Although perhaps we needn't go another round, as I already lost the drinking contest to Brother Zhu, and have lost again in the temple. Rider Han, Jade Han, and Zhang Asheng took to their feet, and the others straightened themselves as much as their injuries allowed. We are happy to fight one more round. Our opponent may choose the time, the place, and the rules. Qiu Chuji smiled. They were indeed competitive. So you will agree to my suggestion, no matter what? Zhu Kong and Gildan Quan were confident they stood a chance at victory, whatever perverse or clever trick the Taoist came up with. You decide. The word of a gentleman, Qiu Chuji said, is as true as a horseman's whip, Jade Han finished. Ke made no reply. If my terms are deemed unsuitable, I will of course admit defeat, Qiu Chuji continued. It was an obvious tactic, playing to their vanity. Just give us the rules, Ke said. Qiu Chuji sat back down. The method I have devised may seem protracted, but it is a true test of skill rather than brute force or momentary bravery. Every martial artist is trained to fight with fist and blade. There is nothing special about that. And besides, we have our good reputations to protect. We are not mere thugs. If we're not going to fight, then what? The 7 freaks wondered. Another drinking contest? This challenge, 7 against 1, will not only determine who has more skill, but also determination and stamina, as well as tactical intelligence. By the end, we will know who is worthy of the name hero. The 7 freaks were boiling over with anticipation. Tell us, Jade Han said. If the challenge involves mixing together elixirs of immortality or charms to drive away ghosts, we must accept defeat now, Zhu Kong said, smiling. Qiu Chuji smiled back. And I wouldn't want to compete with Brother Zhu in a contest of pickpocketing and filching. Tell us! Jade Han was growing ever more impatient. At the heart of our dispute lay a misunderstanding, all because the lives of 2 descendants of loyal patriots are in danger. It is to this matter we must return. Qiu Chuji began relating the story of how he met Skyfury Guo and Ironheart Yang, the fight in the snow, and his pursuit of Justice Duan to this very temple. The 7 freaks were just as disgusted with the corrupt Song court as with the brutal Jin, and vowed their allegiance to the brothers Guo and Yang. The woman Commander Duan kidnapped was Skyfury Guo's widow, Madame Li. You saw her, I am sure.
I remember her voice. I could never forget it, Kejene said.
Good, Qiu Chuji continued. I know not where Ironheart Yang's widow is to be found, however, but I have met her, and you have not. So my suggestion is, we find Madame Li and you find Madame Bao, and whoever succeeds first will be determined the winner. Am I right? Jade Han interrupted. Finding them may not be easy, but it is hardly a test worthy of determining a hero. No, my proposal is more complicated.
What is it?
Impatience was now getting the better of Kei Zhane. Both women are pregnant. We will find them, make sure they are safe, and help them with the birth. As the children grow and mature, the seven freaks were astonished at where this was going. Then what?
Then what?
Sorry, Ryder Han urged. We will train them. Once they have reached the age of 18, we and the other invited masters of the Wulin will gather at the Garden of the Eight Drunken Immortals. First we will feast, and then our disciples will fight each other. The seven freaks looked at each other. Were we to fight and the seven heroes defeat me, the glory of the victory would be tainted by the fact that you outnumber me. But in passing our skills on to one disciple each, we will better see whose skills are worthy of earning them the title Master.
So it shall be,
Kejene cried, thumping his staff against the temple floor.
But what if Madame Li has already been killed by Commander Duan? Said Gildan Quan.
That is a matter for fate, Qiu Chuji replied. If the heavens have favored me, then so be it. If the heavens have favored me, then so be it.
Fine, Ryder Han rejoined. We will have helped those poor widows and their unborn children even if we lose, which is the noblest course of action.
Exactly, Brother Han, Qiu Chuji said, gesturing his approval. I would be most grateful if the seven heroes took care of my dead brother Guo's child and raised him to adulthood. He turned and bowed to each one in turn. He and Guo are not related by blood, they're martial blood. It's a manliness thing. I don't know. They're martial brothers. Now, well, he's saying he knew him for about 24 hours tops, so I don't know. Anyway, he considers him a brother.
You have been exceedingly clever with this plan, Zhu Kong said, as it will involve 18 years of hard work.
Qiu Chuji's countenance changed, and he started laughing. What's so funny? Jade Han challenged. The seven heroes have a reputation for generosity and a willingness to help others in need, Qiu Chuji said. Heroes with a strong sense of justice, they say.
And?
Ryder Han and Zhang Asheng demanded in unison. But I see now this was a gross exaggeration. The freaks were incensed, and Ryder Han slammed his fist on the bench. But Qiu Chuji continued before he could interrupt. Since time immemorial, martial heroes have sworn allegiance to one another. They have been prepared to die for friendship. In times of peril, who cares for mine own flesh? Justice was the only honorable consideration, and for who could balk at giving their life for such a noble cause? Could you imagine King Kei or Nie Zheng hesitating over such a matter? The Yang and Guo families are in grave distress and in need of our assistance, and you quibble over the details of our contest? Zhu Kong's cheeks were hot with shame. He was an educated man and knew well the righteous conduct of ancient men described in the biographies from Sima Qian's records of the grand historian.
Yes, your reverence is correct to point this out. I was mistaken. We will do just as you suggest.
Today is the 24th day of the third lunar month, Qiu Chuji began, standing up. We shall meet again on this very same day, 18 years from now, at noon, at the Garden of the Eight Drunken Immortals. With the other heroes of the Wulin as our witness, we will see who among us is truly deserving of the title Master. and with a flick of his sleeve, he left.
I'm going to look for Justice Duan,
Rider Han announced.
We can't let him go to ground, or we'll never track him down.
As the only one not to have sustained any injury, he marched out of the door, swung himself up onto his famous golden steed, Wind Chaser, and went in pursuit of Commander Duan and Lily Li.
Brother! Brother!
Zhu Kong called after him.
You've never laid eyes on them before.
But it was too late. Rider Han was impatient by nature, and his horse true to its name. Two. Justice Duan grabbed at Lily Li, slipped out of the temple, and began running. Some distance thence he looked back, and was relieved to see no one following them. He slowed the pace and made for the river. There he spotted a small boat, jumped down onto the bow, and, brandishing his sword, ordered the ferryman to start moving. The land south of the Yangtze was crisscrossed with a spider's web of rivers. Canals and boats were the usual mode of transportation, just as northerners traveled the plains by horse and carriage. No boatman would dare disobey an official, so the man unfastened the moorings and pushed the boat out away from the city. What a mess! Duan's thoughts were an internal tussle. If I go back to Linan, my uncle will surely have me killed. I'd better go north. With any luck, the Taoist and the 7 freaks will have perished from their injuries, and my uncle from his anger. Then I will be able to return and resume my post. He instructed the boatman to follow the river northward. Duan changed out of his official's clothes and forced Lily Li to do the same. They swapped boats several times on their way north. After 10 days they arrived in Yangzhou, where Duan stopped at an inn. But just as they had settled in, he heard someone outside asking the innkeeper if a Commander Duan had come this way. He peered through a crack in the door. There stood an extraordinarily ugly, stumpy man, accompanied by a pretty young girl. They spoke with heavy Jiaxing accents, dialects, sorry. The 7 freaks, he deduced. As luck would have it, the Yangzhou innkeeper was struggling to understand them, giving Duan enough time to grab Lily Li and slip out the back door. She tried to call out, but Duan silenced her, boxing her around the ear despite the searing pain in his arm. He then dragged her back to the water. They were back on the Grand Canal within minutes, and on their way north again. This time they did not stop until they arrived at the garrison post of Guo, on the shores of Lake Mount Wei. W-E-I as opposed to W-A-Y? W-E-I as opposed to W-A-Y, whatever. Just inside the borders of Shandong province. Lily Li spent every waking hour wailing and cursing her captor. Duan was no gentleman, to be sure, but he never had any improper intentions, as far as she could discern. She was a somewhat plain country girl, with unbound feet, who was by now much swollen with child. Instead, they bickered and scuffled, and never had a moment's peace. He may have been a commanding officer in the Song army, but his martial arts were poor, and fighting Lily Li with only one arm was taking all his strength. Within days, however, the short man and the pretty girl had caught up with them. Duan wanted to hide in their room, but knowing her rescuers had come, Lily Li started screaming. Duan seized a cotton quilt and stuffed it into her mouth, hitting her as he did so. Lily Li was proving to be a liability. He would be better off killing her, he reflected. After they heard Rider Han and Jade Han leave, Duan drew his saber. Lily Li had been waiting for a chance to avenge her husband, but Duan tied her hands and legs every night before bed. She saw a murderous glimmer in his eyes, and whispered to herself, "Dear husband, please protect me and help me kill this villain. I will be with you soon." She reached into her shirt and removed the dagger Qiu Chuji had given her. She had hidden it so well that Duan was unaware of its existence. Duan sneered and raised his saber. Lily Li was prepared. She summoned her strength and ran at Duan, dagger first. A gust of cold air skimmed Duan's cheeks. He twisted his weapon, hoping to knock the dagger from her grasp. Yet its blade was so sharp that it sliced crisply through the saber's blade. The tip of Lily's dagger chipped off and ricocheted in the direction of Duan's ribcage. He stumbled backward as it slashed open the front of his shirt and scored his flesh with a bloody stripe. Had Lily used just a little more force, the blade would have eviscerated him. He grabbed a chair and held it in front of him. "Put the dagger down and I won't hurt you!" Too exhausted to fight any more, and with the baby kicking inside her, Lily crumpled in a heap on the floor, panting. But she held the dagger firm. Duan manhandled her onto another boat, and together they headed farther northward to Lingqing, Dezhou, and on to Hebei province. Lily Li was not making escape any easier. She screamed and shouted nonsense when they stopped at inns or traveled in boats, attracting considerable attention. She would tear at her clothes and pull strange faces. Had she gone mad? At first Duan believed it must be so. But after a few days he realized she was leaving a trail of clues for her rescuers. Summer had passed and an autumn chill cooled the air. They were by now far into the Jin-controlled north, but Duan was running out of silver, and his enemies were still close behind. They traveled until they reached the Jin Empire's capital, Yanjing. There they would find a quiet place to hide, and Duan would get rid of her. The 7 freaks would never find them in such a large city. But before they reached the city gates, a group of Jin soldiers stopped them and commanded them to carry supplies. The soldiers were traveling north with an emissary, charged with presenting the northern Mongolian tribes with Jin imperial ordinances. Ordinary Han Chinese citizens were being forced to act as porters. Lily was dressed in men's clothing, but as she was so short, was given a lighter pole. Duan was left to stagger under his 100 Jin load. There's multiple Jins. None of them are the Middle Eastern kind. So the Jin Emperor Imperial area is where they're at, and then Jin is also a measure of weight. I don't know if they're pronounced differently. Something people I've already warned about. This is not a language I'm familiar with, so I'm going to pronounce things wrong. If you know the correct pronunciations, please feel free to correct me. Do not hesitate, because I don't know. I also don't know how much a Jin weighs. It's pretty heavy. Duan tried protesting their treatment, but reply came in the form of several lashes across the head. This was not an alien situation to Duan, it was just that previously he had been the one holding the whip. A crucial difference. No, seriously, that's what it says. A crucial difference. It really says that. Like, I'm not being sassy. The book is being sassy. This was not an alien situation to Duan. It was just that previously he had been the one holding the whip. A crucial difference. Octobers in the north were bitter, and the sky swirled with snow and sand, and shelter was hard to come by. They lined up alongside the 300 Jin soldiers, and together they trudged through the open country. One by one they caught the faint sound of shouting carried on the wind from up ahead, and in the distance they could make out a cloud of sand kicked up by a throng of horses. They fast approached. A defeated tribe from beyond the Gobi, swathed in furs. The Jin ranks dispersed, throwing their weapons behind them. Those without horses escaped on foot, but were soon crushed in the stampede. Lily Li dropped her pole and ran in the opposite direction to the others. She could not see where Duan had gone, but no one was taking any notice of her. She ran and ran until after some distance she felt a stabbing pain in her stomach. She collapsed behind a sand dune and fainted. There she remained until long after nightfall, when she woke to what in her confusion sounded like the cries of a baby. Her mind a fog, she wondered if she might in fact have passed into the afterlife, but the wails were getting louder. With a sudden jerk, she felt something warm between her legs. There was a break in the snow, and a bright round moon peered from behind the clouds. She was awake now, and her chest was heaving with heavy sobs. Her baby was born. She sat up and took the baby into her arms. A boy. Still crying, she bit through the umbilical cord and wrapped him tight to her bosom. His eyes shone in the moonlight, beneath two thick eyebrows. His cries were strong and carried far. These were no conditions for giving birth, but the sight of her baby gave Lily Lee a strength she had never before known. She rolled over onto her knees, and pulled them both into a small ditch near by to take shelter. There she cried for her baby's father, lost forever. They made the ditch their home for the night. The next day, when the sun was high in the sky, Lily Lee summoned the courage to move. She looked out across the steppe at the dead men and horses scattered everywhere. Not a survivor to be seen. She found some food in the knapsack of a dead soldier, as well as a knife and flint. She sliced some flesh from a horse and cooked it over a fire. Then she skinned another, wrapping one hide around the baby and another around herself. She and the baby lived like this for 10 days, eating horse meat preserved in the snow, until she had regained enough strength to take her child and make her way east in the direction of the rising sun. The hate and anger she had been carrying with her was now transformed into love, and on she walked, doing her best to protect her son from the cutting desert winds. She walked for days, the ground around her gradually turning ever greener. As the sun began to set, she saw 2 horses approaching on the horizon. The riders pulled on their reins and stopped to ask if she needed assistance. They were Mongolian shepherds, and did not know Chinese, but instinctively they understood the young mother's story. They brought her back to their gers and gave her food and a place to rest. They were moving camp the next morning in search of fresh pasture, but before departing they gave her 4 lambs for her new family. And so it came to pass that Guo's son was born and raised on the Mongolian steppe. Three years passed. Lily Li named the boy Guo Jing, as Qiu Chuji had suggested. He was a slow developer, speaking his first words only at the age of 4, but he was strong and able to herd cattle and sheep all by himself. Mother and son depended on each other for survival, living a simple yet backbreaking existence. They learned Mongolian, but when together still spoke in the Linan dialect of Chinese. The boy's soft voice saddened his mother. "You should be able to speak your father's Shandong tongue, but I never learned it in the short time we had together," she would say. It was October. The air was growing colder. Guo Jing, now 6 years old, rode each day out to pasture, accompanied by his sheepdog. Just as the sun was at its highest, a large black bird appeared in the sky. It hovered above the herd briefly, then swooped. One of the young sheep broke free and ran. Guo Jing jumped onto his pony and galloped 7 or 8 li before at last catching it. Just as he was about to turn back with the sheep, a deep rumble came echoing across the steppe. Was it thunder? He was not sure what it was, but it frightened him. It grew louder, until a horse's neigh rose above it, followed by more horses and men shouting. He had never heard anything like it. He hurried the sheep up a small hill and into a nearby clump of bushes. Safely hidden, he ventured a glimpse out. Through the plumes of dust, an army was racing toward him. Guo Jing watched as the commanding general barked an order, and the army broke into two, and within seconds assumed formation. They wore splendid white turbans, into which they had stuck colored feathers. A brief silence, then a blast of horns from the left. Another army. 3 rows charged forward. The young man leading them, an elongated figure in a red cape, held his sword high. The 2 armies clashed, and a bloody battle commenced. The advancing army had fewer men, and were beaten back before long, but support was quick to arrive, and the fighting grew ever more fierce. Just as the battle appeared to be waning, a blast of horns came again from the east, shaking the remaining men into new life. "The great Khan Temujin has arrived! The great Khan has arrived!" The fighting continued, but now the soldiers kept looking over in the direction of the horns. Guo Jing followed their gazes eastward. A cloud of sand swelled until through it broke a group of riders, holding high a pole from which hung white hair. Their cheers grew louder, bolstering the riders' allies and scattering the hitherto tight formations of their foe. Guo Jing watched from deeper under cover as the banner approached the very hill upon which he was standing. The tall, middle-aged man was prominent among the riders. A tall, middle-aged man was prominent among the riders. He wore a helmet made of shiny metal, and his chin laid growth to a brown tuft of beard. And his chin, yep, I read that correctly. And his chin laid growth to a brown tuft of beard. Guo Jing did not know this was the leader of the Mongolians, the great Khan Temujin, later to be known throughout history as the mighty Genghis Khan. He did not even know what the word Khan meant. But he understood the man's power, and it frightened him. Temujin and a few of his men sat astride their horses, watching the battle below. Presently they were joined by the young man dressed in the red cape, who called out to the Khan.
"Father, we are outnumbered. Should we retreat?"
"Yes, take your men to the east." He turned back to the battlefield. "Mukali, accompany the second prince and his men back to the west. Bogurchi, you and Chilaun go north. Kublai, you and Subotai south. When my banner is raised and the bugle sounds, turn back and attack." The men rode down the hill, and within moments the Mongolian army was on the retreat.
"Capture Temujin! Capture Temujin!"
The enemy forces, meanwhile, were trying to fight their way up the hill. Temujin stood firm at the top, protected from coming arrows by a wall of shields. 3,000 men, led by Temujin's brother-in-arms Kutuku and his bravest general Jelme, were mounting a valiant defense at the foot of the hill. The ground shook with the clash of swords and the roar of battle. Guo Jing watched, now just as excited as he was frightened. The fighting continued for an hour or so, as thousands of enemy soldiers mounted charge after charge. Temujin's elite guard lost some 400 men, but killed at least 10,000. And yet arrow fire remained intense. Combat was especially savage on the northeastern side, where the Khan's ranks looked as if they might collapse at any moment.
"Father, isn't it time to raise the banner?"
Ogadai, Temujin's third son, implored. Temujin's eyes were sharply focused like an eagle's, never moving from the battlefield. But their men are not yet spent, he answered gruffly. Sorry, I read half the sentence and then my brain was like, I don't know where I am. Sorry about that. The disadvantages of doing this live. The enemy soldiers mounted a renewed attack on the northeastern side under the command of 3 of their best generals, each with his own black banner. The Mongol forces were steadily losing ground. Jelme came riding up the hill.
"Khan, our men can't hold on much longer."
"Can't hold on? Call yourself a man fit to lead men?" Jelme's cheeks flushed. He grabbed a sword from one of Temujin's guard, turned and howled as he charged forward, hacking a bloody path through the enemy, right up to the black banners. The generals pulled back hard. Jelme stabbed all three bannermen in quick succession, then threw down his weapon, grabbed the flags, and returned to Temujin, planting them upside down at the Khan's feet. Fighting continued. An enemy commander dressed in black appeared from the southwest. Within seconds, he had shot a quiver's worth of arrows, each taking one Mongol soldier. Two Mongol commanders charged at him with their spears. Both commanders were shot from their horses. "Lovely!" Temujin said, just as an arrow lodged in his neck. Things happen quickly in this. Another followed close behind, heading straight for his stomach. Temujin reared his horse. The arrow sank deep into the steed's chest, so only the feathers remained visible. The horse fell to the ground. Temujin's men watched in shock. The enemy were pouring up the hill, howling as loudly as their lungs would allow. Ogadai pulled the arrow from his father's neck, tore the shirt from his back, and began bandaging the wound. "Don't worry about me, son," Temujin said. "Defend the pass." Ogadai turned and shot down two enemy soldiers. Kutuku had been leading an attack from the west, but his men were forced to retreat after using up all of their arrows. "Kutuku!" Jelme said, his eyes red. "You run like a scared rabbit?" "Run?" Kutuku replied. "We have no more arrows." Temujin threw Kutuku a handful of arrows from where he lay in the mud. Kutuku loaded his bow and shot the closest general, then ran down the hill and retrieved his horse. "Excellent, my brother!" Temujin said as Kutuku returned. "Why not raise the banner and sound the horns?" Kutuku suggested, his cheeks smeared with blood. Temujin pressed against the wound in his neck. Blood pulsed through his fingers and down his wrist. "Not yet. The enemies still have life left in them." "We are not afraid to die here on the field," Kutuku said, dropping to his knees. "But the Khan is in grave danger." Temujin took the reins and struggled up onto the saddle. "We must defend the pass," he said as he spurred his horse. Raising his saber... Come on now. It's called a muffler. Raising his saber, he sliced through three enemy soldiers charging up the hill toward them. Sorry, I'm hoping that's not coming through too loudly on here. Temujin's reappearance took the enemy by surprise. Now was the time. "Raise the banners! Sound the horns!" A howl went up. One of the guardsmen stood on his horse and raised the white horsehair banner. The horns sounded. The deafening blast was instantly drowned out by the roar of battle, as line after line of soldiers thundered forward. The enemy outnumbered the Mongols, but they were now facing an attack from all sides. The outer forces broke within moments, and the fighting engulfed the central guard. The general in black was barking orders, but morale was crumbling. It took the Mongol army less than an hour to obliterate their opponents. Those left alive fled, including the general in black, who galloped off toward the horizon. "3 jin of gold to whoever catches him," Temujin called. A dozen of Temujin's best men sped after the fleeing general. The general turned and fired back at his pursuers, knocking man after man from his horse, until they dropped back and let him go. Temujin's men had claimed a resolute victory over their long-standing enemy, oh my god, I don't know how to pronounce that, the Taiyichiyud. The Taiyichiyud. I don't know, something like that. Tayyichi''ud. Taiyichiyud. Sure. I hope I don't have to say that one again, because I don't know. If anyone is familiar with how to pronounce Mongolian words, That'd be good. Now's your time to shine. Temujin's men had claimed a resolute victory over their long-standing enemy, the Taoist. Temujin was flooded with memories of his capture at their hands, their beatings and insults, the torture and the yoke. Today's victory had gone some way to redressing that humiliation. His heart quickened, and a laugh bubbled up from within. The earth shook with the shouts of his men as they withdrew from the bloody field. Four. Guo Jing waited until darkness had fallen and the soldiers charged with clearing the battlefield had left, before emerging from his bush and starting back. It was well past midnight by the time he arrived home, where Lily Li had been waiting with ever-increasing alarm. Guo Jing was met by a relieved mother's arms. He described to her all he had seen. Lily Li listened to her son's stammering, clumsy account, and was reminded of her late husband, his twitching caterpillar eyebrows, his fascination with battle, and it felt like the thrust of a blade to her heart. A few days later, Lily Li left for the nearest market, some 30 li hence, with 2 wool blankets. Guo Jing, meanwhile, took the sheep out to pasture as usual. Out in the grassland, his mind galloped back to the fight. He spurred his horse, raised his whip, and shouted, herding his flock, imagining himself to be a general leading his men. Just then the beating of hooves could be heard in the east. A horse was approaching. At first it appeared to be riderless, but Guo Jing realized as it drew close that its master was resting his head on the mane. It stopped, and the rider looked up. It was the black general from the battle, his face soiled with blood and dirt. In his left hand he held what remained of his saber, not more than a hilt, it, too, covered in blood. This was his only weapon. His left cheek had been slashed, with blood pouring from the wound, as had his horse's legs. The man shuddered, locking his bloodshot eyes on Guo Jing. "Water! Some water, please?" the man managed to gasp. Guo Jing ran the short distance back home and emerged with a bowl of water. The man grabbed it and drank it all down at once. "Another bowl!" Guo Jing fetched another. Blood turned the water red as he drank. The man laughed, then his face twitched and he fell from his horse. Guo Jing did not know what to do. Before long the man regained consciousness. "Some water for my horse, and how about something to eat?" he said. Guo Jing re-emerged with some chunks of cooked lamb and more water. Food seemed to energize the man, and once finished he struggled to his feet. "Thank you, brother!" He then slipped a thick gold bracelet from his wrist and handed it to Guo Jing. "Here, for you." Guo Jing shook his head. "Mother says you should never expect anything in return for common kindness." "You're a good boy," the man said, replacing the bracelet. He then tore a section from his sleeve and began bandaging the horse's wounds as well as his own. Then, from the east, came the sound of more horses. "Won't they let me go?" the man growled. On the horizon, rolling waves of dust were already visible. They were coming this way. "Boy, do you keep a bow and arrows in the house?" "Yes," Guo Jing replied, and ran back inside. The man was visibly relieved, but relief quickly turned to disappointment when he saw Guo Jing reappear with the small bow and arrow he used for playing. "I meant the kind for fighting, a big one." Guo Jing shook his head. The riders were getting closer, their banners now visible in the distance.
The black general realized he would not be able to outrun them on an injured horse. "I can't fight them by myself, so I'm going to hide," he said to Guo. But there was nowhere suitable in or around the small thatched cottage. He was desperate. The only place he could think of was the large pile of drying hay nearby. "I'm going to hide in there," he said, pointing. "Chase my horse away as far as you can, then find somewhere to hide and don't let them see you." With that, he scrambled into the haystack. Guo whipped the man's horse, and it cantered far into the distance before stopping to munch on some fresh grass. Guo mounted his colt and took off in the opposite direction. The riders had spotted people ahead and sent 2 men on before them. They soon caught up.
"Boy, have you seen a man on a black horse come past this way?"
Guo was no good at lying, so he did not answer. The men asked again and again, but still the boy refused to speak.
"Let's take him to see the prince,"
one of the men suggested. They took hold of Guo reins and rode with him back to the cottage. "I won't tell them anything," Guo decided as they approached his home. There stood a tall, thin man draped in a red cape, encircled by a crowd of soldiers. Guo recognized the man. He had taken part in the battle on the hill only 2 days before.
"What did the boy say?"
the prince barked.
"He's frightened and won't speak."
The prince cast his eyes around him until they fell upon a black horse grazing in the distance.
"Is that his horse? Bring it here," he said.
10 soldiers split into pairs, surrounded the horse, and led it back.
"This is Jiebe's horse, is it not?"
"Yes, sir."
The prince approached Guo and struck him lightly across the head with his whip.
"Where is he? Tell me. You can't fool me."
Jiebe gripped his broken saber even tighter, his heart thudding. He knew this was Temujin's eldest son, Jochi, famed for his brutality. The boy was going to give him away. He had to be prepared to fight. Guo was in pain, but fought back his tears. "Why did you hit me?" he asked, holding his head high. "I haven't done anything wrong."
"You're a stubborn boy,"
Jochi growled as he whipped Guo once more. This time tears gathered in Guo eyes. Jochi's shoulders... Getting tongue-tied, are we? Jochi's soldiers had been searching the house, and two men even poked at the haystack with their spears, but as luck would have it, they did not hit Jiebe.
"He can't have got far without his horse. Boy, are you going to tell me where he is?"
Jochi struck Guo across the head 3 more times, each time a little harder. Guo made a vain attempt to grab the prince's whip. Then came the sound of horns in the distance.
"The great Khan is coming!"
Jochi lowered his whip. The soldiers rushed to gather around the Khan as he stopped in front of them.
"Father!"
Temujin's injuries were grave. Temujin's injuries were grave. The Khan had summoned his last reserves of energy to fight out the battle, but fainted several times after Jiebe left. His general Jelme and 3rd son Ogadai took turns sucking the blood clots from his wounds, and together his 4 sons and best generals waited by his bed through the night until he was out of danger. Early the next morning, the Khan's men rode in search of Jiebe, swearing they would catch and quarter him. One small group found him around dawn that morning, and a fight ensued, but the black general had prevailed.
"Father, we found his horse,"
Jochi announced, pointing it out for the Khan. "The horse is no good to me. I want the man," Temujin replied.
"Of course, father, we'll find him,"
Jochi said. He went back to Guo unsheathed his saber, and swung it menacingly above the boy's head.
"Well, are you going to tell me now?"
The earlier beating had emboldened the boy. "No!" Temujin noted the boy did not claim ignorance. "Trick it out of him," Temujin whispered to his third son. Ogadai approached Guojing with a smile and plucked 2 resplendent peacock feathers from his helmet. "These are yours, if you tell me." "No!" Guojing insisted.
"Release the dogs!"
An order from Temujin's second son, Chagatai. The soldiers brought forth 6 of Chagatai's beloved mastiffs, led them to where Jebe's horse was grazing to catch his scent, and then let them loose. They ran straight for the cottage and out again, roaring and barking. Guojing was no friend to Jebe, but he had admired the general's bravery on the battlefield, and Jochi's whipping had only strengthened his resolve. Guojing whistled to his sheepdog. Chagatai's mastiffs were circling in on the haystack, but Guojing commanded his dog to block them. Chagatai shouted, and the mastiffs pounced. Howls, barks, teeth clashing. Though outnumbered, Guojing's sheepdog fought back bravely, but within moments he was covered in large gashes. Guojing cheered between his tears. Temujin, Ogadai, and the rest of their men knew Jebe must be in the haystack, but as there was no escape for the Black General, they decided to enjoy the dogfight first. Like civilized people, I guess. I don't know. I guess it's just what you did back then. But Jochi could not wait and took his whip to Guojing. The boy rolled on the grass in pain, close to where Jochi was standing. Then suddenly he jumped up and grabbed hold of Jochi's right leg. Jochi tried to shake him off, but Guojing was surprisingly strong. Jochi's brothers started laughing, and even the great Khan had to hide a smile. Jochi's cheeks flashed scarlet. He pulled out his saber and swung at Guojing's head. Just as the blade was about to slice the boy's head clean from his neck, out from the haystack popped a broken saber to block his swing. Jochi felt his fingers shake, and he nearly dropped his weapon. Jebe scrambled out from under the hay and pulled Guojing behind him.
"Taken to bullying children now? Have you no shame?"
The soldiers surrounded Jebe, spears at the ready. He had nowhere to go. Jebe threw down his broken saber. Jochi made to punch Jebe in the chest.
"Go on, kill me!"
the Black General shouted back, instead of defending himself.
"Shame I won't be granted the honor of dying at the hands of a true hero."
"What did you say?" Temujin cried.
"Were I to die on the battlefield, defeated by a hero, I would have no regrets. But today an eagle has fallen and is about to be eaten by ants."
Jebe then howled. Chagatai's hunting dogs had pinned Guojing's sheepdog to the ground, and were chomping and snarling at it, but Jebe's call stopped them, and they retreated, tails between their legs.
"Great Khan, such arrogance is not to be tolerated,"
one of Temujin's men cried, stepping out from the crowd.
"Let me fight him."
"Fine, you show him," Temujin replied. It was one of his best generals, Bogurchi. "If there's one thing we have plenty of, it's heroes."
"I'll kill you, so you may die with no regrets." "So you may die with no regrets,"
Bogurchi cried as he stepped forward. "And who are you?" Jebe replied, eyeing the sturdy man opposing him.
"My name is Bogurchi. Maybe you've heard of me?"
Jebe felt a shiver go through him. So this is the famous Bogurchi? Jebe said to himself. His fame precedes him. He is a hero among the Mongols. But he rolled his eyes and snorted, feigning indifference. "You are named for your great skills with the bow and arrow," Temujin said to Jebe. "Why not see who is more skilled, you or my sworn brother here?"
"You are a sworn brother to the great Khan?"
Jebe turned to Bogurchi.
"In that case, I'll take pleasure in killing you first."
The Mongol soldiers burst into laughter. Bogurchi's unparalleled fighting skills had made him famous across the steppe. Jebe may well be a talented archer, but was he a match for the great Bogurchi? As a boy, Temujin had been taken prisoner by his father's former allies, the Taichiud, and taken to the banks of the Onan River, where they thrust his head through where they thrust his head through the flat wooden panel of a kange. Cangue? I don't know. Kangyu? Kangwe? I don't know. Let's go with that. Kange. There they drank and lashed him with their whips. Sounds basically like it's waterboarding. Sounds pretty unpleasant, actually. Temujin waited until his captors were incapacitated with drink before knocking the guard over the head with a kange, still locked around his neck, and escaped into the forest. The Taichiuds called a search across the steppe. A young man by the name of Chila-un took pity on Temujin, and, risking the wrath of the Taichiud, broke the kange from Temujin's neck, burned it, and sheltered the fugitive in a cart of fleeces. Presently, the Taichiud men came and searched... this is killing me here. This is a lot of apostrophes. Golly gee willikers, I'm sorry. I was hoping this would go smoother. I forgot about the Mongolians. Presently, the Taichiud men came. Presently, the Taichiud men came and searched Chila-un's home. The men spotted the cart and began removing the fleeces, one layer at a time. Just as they were about to uncover the future Khan, Chila-un's father interrupted the soldiers. The weather is so hot, how could he be hiding in the fleeces? He would be dead by now. The summer solstice was upon them, and sweat poured from their bodies like storm rains. The old man spoke sense, so the soldiers left. Temujin had fled home, and now, along with his mother and younger brother, was forced to keep moving across the steppe, surviving on wild rats and his horsemanship to keep them ahead of their pursuers. One day, 8 of Temujin's white horses were stolen by a rival tribe. Temujin was giving chase when he encountered a young man milking his horse. Had he seen where the thieves had fled? This was Bogurchi. We both know the hardships a man faces in these grasslands. Let us be friends, he said. They rode together for 3 days before at last catching up with the thieves. They fought side by side. Their arrows slayed hundreds of men, and together they recovered the horses. Temujin offered to give Bogurchi 4, but Bogurchi refused. This I did for friendship, nothing more. In one another they found a bond deeper than any other. Temujin now gave his bow to Bogurchi and jumped down from his steed. Ride my horse, use my bow and arrows. It will be as if I killed him myself. As you command. Bogurchi took the bow in his left hand, the arrows in his right, and jumped up onto Temujin's beloved white horse. Give your horse to Jebe, Temujin said to Ogadai. He is most fortunate indeed, Ogadai said, dismounting. One of the bodyguards led the horse to Jebe. I am surrounded, Jebe said to Temujin, once seated on Ogadai's horse. You could have killed me easier than a sheep. I dare not ask for more favors. Just give me a bow. No arrows are necessary. No arrows? Bogurchi said. That's right. I could kill you with just a bow. Again the Mongolian soldiers guffawed. How he boasts! What a braggart! Temujin ordered them to give Jebe one of their best bows. Bogurchi knew Jebe's shot was precise, but to fight without arrows? Bogurchi realized Jebe must be planning to send his arrows back at him. He squeezed his thighs and Temujin's horse sprang forward. Jebe pulled on his reins. Bogurchi knocked an arrow, pulled back, and shot. Jebe reached out. The arrow was in his hand. Impressive, Bogurchi said to himself. Another arrow. Jebe listened as it cut through the air. This one he couldn't catch. He pressed his body flat against the horse's back. The arrow passed above, ruffling the hairs on his head. He spurred, turned his horse, hauled himself upright. But Bogerchi fed his bow quickly, and 2 more arrows came whistling toward him. He slipped down from his saddle, his right foot still hooked into the stirrup, and held himself inches from the ground, slipping by below. There he fluttered at the horse's feet, like a trapped kite. He turned, loaded the arrow he had caught, fired it, and flipped back into the saddle. "Amazing!" Bogerchi breathed. He shot at the approaching arrow. The arrowheads clashed, twisted, and sank into the sand. Cheers arose from Temujin and his men. Bogerchi knocked an arrow, aimed left, waited for Jebe to react, and shot right. Jebe knocked the arrow away with his bow into the dirt. Bogerchi fired 3 more arrows in a rapid flurry, all of which Jebe dodged with ease. Jebe spurred his horse, leaned down, picked 3 arrows from the dirt, bent his bow, and shot. Bogerchi leaped up and stood on his saddle in an extravagant display. Balancing on his left foot, he kicked the flying arrows away with his right, before pulling back his bow with all his power and letting fly. Jebe jerked to one side and shot an arrow at Bogerchi's, splitting it along the shaft. Bogerchi was growing uneasy and increasingly impatient. He fired a blur of arrows. Unable to catch so many in succession, Jebe contrived to avoid them. But still the arrows kept coming, thick and fast, until he was struck in the left shoulder. The crowd cheered. Smiling, Bogerchi reached for another arrow, intending to kill Jebe. His hand felt into his quiver's deepest corners. There were none left. He always took sufficient supplies with him into battle, 2 quivers around his waist and 6 on his horse. But he was not using his own mount now. He was riding the Khan's. He pulled the horse round, stooped, and swept at the moving grass. Jebe knew this was his chance, and fired an arrow square into Bogerchi's back. A gasp rose from the crowd. It was a painful blow, but despite the force of the shot, the arrow failed to penetrate Bogerchi's clothing and fell to the ground. Bogerchi reached down and inspected the arrow. Jebe had removed the arrowhead. "I avenge the great Khan! You needn't show me any mercy!" Bogerchi cried, sitting back in the saddle.
Jebe shows no mercy to his enemies. I have killed you, in all but deed.
Temujin had been watching in distress, but his fears were allayed when he realized Bogerchi was unhurt. He would have exchanged 10,000 sheep, oxen, and horses to keep his best general and friend from being killed.
"Enough!" Temujin called. "You have proven your prowess. We no longer seek vengeance upon you. I am not asking the Khan to spare my life. Then what do you want?" "It is him I wish to be spared," Jebe answered, pointing at Guo Jing standing by the door. "All I ask is that the Khan troubles the child no more. As for myself," he continued, "I wounded the Khan and deserve punishment. Come, Bogerchi."
He pulled the arrow from his shoulder and loaded his bow, the blood still dripping from the tip.
"Fine! Let's fight!"
A deluge of arrows rushed from Bogerchi's bow, forming a chain through the air. Jebe hooked his foot through the stirrup, tucked himself under his horse's belly, and aimed. Bogerchi's white colt pulled left without his master's command, but Jebe had been swift, and the arrow hit the horse in the forehead, bringing it crashing to the ground. Bogerchi fired as he rolled, splitting the bow in Jebe's hand. Jebe cursed and steered his horse away from Bogerchi's arrows. Cheers rose from the spectators. "He's an impressive archer," Bogerchi had to admit. He bent his bow, aimed at Jebe's back, and let go. The arrow hit Jebe in the back of the head. Jebe convulsed and fell from his horse, the arrow landing in the grass beside him. But Bogerchi too had removed the arrowhead. He loaded another arrow and held it aimed at Jebe. "Great Khan!" he cried, turning to Temujin. "Have mercy and let him go!" Will you not surrender? Temujin responded. Jebei's stubborn defiance was overcome. He ran over to Temujin and knelt at his feet. Temujin smiled. From this day forward, you fight with me. Mongolians often turn to song to express their feelings. Kneeling before the Khan, Jebei began to sing. The great Khan is merciful, as befits his name, which I will repay with my protection, with contempt of fire and water, and rebel against dark seas and rupturing cliffs. Take our enemies, gouge out their hearts. I will go wherever I am needed. For the Khan I am always willing. 10,000 miles by sun or moon. Temujin produced 2 gold ingots and gave one each to Bogurchi and Jebei. Great Khan, may I give this to the boy? You may do with your gold as you please, Temujin replied. Jebei approached Guojing and held out the ingot, but Guojing shook his head. Mother says you should never expect anything in return for common kindness. Temujin admired the boy's bravery, but liked him even more after hearing this. What an impressive young man! Then, turning to Jebei, bring him to me later. There we go. He then left, instructing a squad to mount the dead horse on the backs of 2 others, and to follow behind. Jebei was exhausted, but pleased with the outcome. He lay in the grass to rest and wait for the boy's mother to return. You're a good boy. You did the right thing, Lily Li said to Guojing after Jebei told her of her son's fearless conduct, even if the wounds on his face did trouble her. But how would the boy avenge his father's death if he remained a shepherd his whole life? No, it would be better to let him train with the great Khan's men. So mother and son agreed to go with Jebei and join Temujin's tribe. Jebei was put in command of a team of 10 under Temujin's 3rd son, Ogadai. Jebei and Bogurchi held each other in great esteem and became loyal friends. Nor did Jebei forget his debt to Guojing. He took good care of mother and son, and decided he would teach Guojing all his skills with the bow and arrow as soon as the boy was old enough. "5. One day, Guojing was playing with some of the other children when 2 riders came galloping into the encampment with urgent news for the Khan. They rushed to Temujin's ger, and within moments the horns were sounded and soldiers ran from their tents. The men were organized into squads of 10, each with its own commander. These were then organized into companies made up of 10 squads, battalions of 1,000 men, and, finally, divisions of 10,000, each with their own commander. Temujin kept close control of his army through this chain of command. Guojing and the other children watched as the men took up their weapons and mounted their horses. Another horn blast sounded, and the ground shook as the horses gathered into formation. By the end of the 3rd blast, silence had descended as all 50,000 men were lined up before the encampment's main gate. Only the occasional horse's snort broke the quiet. No one spoke, no clanging of weapons was heard. Of our many victories the Jin Empire knows, Temujin cried as he walked through the main gate with his 3 sons. The Jin Emperor sent his 3rd and 6th princes here today to appoint your Khan an officer of the Jin, wailed the sirens. I should probably close my window if that's going to continue. Oh, it stopped. How nice. The Jin Emperor sent his 3rd and 6th princes here today to appoint your Khan an officer of the Jin. The soldiers raised their weapons and hailed their Khan. The Jin controlled all of northern China by the force of a strong and disciplined army. Their influence stretched east to the seas and west to the deserts. The Mongols, in contrast, were just one of many nomadic tribes on the steppe. To be named an official of the Jin Empire was an honor for Temujin. The Khan ordered his eldest son, Jochi, to lead his 10,000-strong corps to welcome their guests. The remaining 40,000 men would wait in formation. News of the growing power of northern tribes such as Temujin's worried the Jin Emperor Wanyan Jing, titled Ming Chang. In reality, the princes were not here just to secure an alliance between the Mongols and the Jin Empire, but to ascertain at first hand their capabilities in case of future conflict. The sixth prince, Wanyan Honglie, was the very same prince who had traveled to Lin'an, where he was wounded by Qiu Chuji, and on to Jiaxing, where he encountered the seven freaks of the south. After some wait, a blot of dust appeared on the horizon, announcing Jochi's return with the two princes, Wanyan Hongshi and Wanyan Honglie, and their force of 10,000 elite soldiers, dressed in the finest brocade and armor. Those on the left of the formation were armed with spears, and those on the right with wolf fang clubs. The clanking of their armor was audible for miles. Sunlight glinted on their uniforms of silk and metal, and they shone ever more resplendent as they came into view. The brothers rode side by side, while Temujin and his men stood by the road, waiting. As they drew near, Wanyan Hongshi caught sight of the children watching, and laughed. He puffed himself up, reached into his shirt for a handful of gold coins, and threw them at them. "A gift!" But, to Mongolians, throwing coins like this was the height of disrespect. These children were descended from soldiers and generals. Not one of them moved to pick up the coins. "Come on, you little devils!" Wanyan Hongshi cried, throwing another handful of coins in frustration. This angered Temujin and his men even more. They may not have had the grand outward trappings of other great civilizations, but the Mongolians were a refined people. They did not swear, even against their gravest enemies or in jest. To step inside a ger was to be treated with utmost hospitality, whether friend or foe, and a guest was to return this favor with decorum. They may not have understood Wanyan Hongshi's heavily accented Mongolian, but they understood his attitude all too well. Guo Jing had grown up on stories of Jin scorn, and of how they had invaded his motherland China, corrupted its officials, and killed its greatest general, Yue Fei. He stepped forward now. "We don't want your money!" he cried, picking some coins from the dirt. He ran and hurled them as hard as he could at the third prince. Wanyan Hongshi ducked, but one struck him on the cheekbone. Temujin's men cheered. It did not especially hurt, but such humiliation at the hands of a 6-year-old boy was too much. He swiped a spear from one of his guards. "I've got you, you little devil!" "Brother!" Wanyan Honglie said, realizing the situation was getting out of control. But it was too late. The third prince had already thrown the weapon. Guo Jing turned, rather than stepped aside. At the last possible moment, an arrow came from the left, like a meteor shooting for the moon, and hit the spear on the head, deflecting it. Guo Jing ran back to the other children, the cheers of Temujin's men shaking the ground beneath him. The arrow belonged to Jebe. "Third brother, forget about him," Wanyan Honglie hissed. The cheers of Temujin's men left Wanyan Hongshi shaken. He glared at Guo Jing. "Little bastard," he muttered. Temujin and his sons stepped forward and led the princes to the Khan's ger, where they served their guests kumis and plates of lamb and beef. With the help of interpreters, Wanyan Hongshi read the royal decree, conferring upon Temujin the title of Queller of Northern Uprisings. Temujin knelt before Wanyan Hongshi and accepted the title and a golden belt, a symbol of his allegiance to the Jin Empire. That night, the Mongolians honored their guests with a lavish feast. With a lavish feast, singular. I'm sorry. That night, the Mongolians honored their guests with a lavish feast.
Tomorrow, my brother and I will bestow on Khan with a title.
Wanyan Honglie stuttered, drunk on kumis.
Will our queller of uprisings join us?
Temujin was delighted and agreed at once. Ong Khan, a Karait, was recognized as the leader of the northern tribes of the steppe. He was the richest and commanded the most men, but was known to be fair and magnanimous in his treatment of others. He was universally liked and respected. Ong Khan was sworn brother of Temujin's father. After Temujin's father was poisoned and Temujin fled, it was Ong Khan who took him in as his own son. Not long after Temujin was married, his wife was captured by the Merkits. It was only after receiving help from Ong Khan and Jamuka, Temujin's sworn brother, that Temujin managed to defeat the Merkits and to reclaim his wife. Is the Jin Empire granting titles on anyone else? Temujin asked.
No,
Wanyan Honglie said.
there are only two men of note in the northern steppe, Ong Khan and the great Khan Temujin.
No one else would be worthy of a title, Wanyan Honglie added. I disagree. There is one man the princes are perhaps unfamiliar with, Temujin said. Is that so? Who? Wanyan Honglie asked. My sworn brother, Jamuka. He is most righteous. Oh, sorry. He is most righteous and commands his men with a just hand. May I ask the princes to bestow an official title on him as well? Temujin and Jamuka had grown up together, cementing their friendship with a bond of brotherhood when Temujin was just 11, a custom known among the Mongolians as anda, sealed with an exchange of gifts. Jamuka and Temujin swapped hunting stones made from deer bone. After the boys became anda, they went to the Onan River while it was still frozen over and threw them out across it. When spring came, the boys swore their brotherhood again, Jamuka giving Temujin a whistling arrow he had carved himself from 2 ox horns, while Temujin presented his friend with a cedar arrowhead. When they reached manhood, they lived with Ong Khan. They would compete every day to see who could rise first and drink a cup of yogurt from Ong Khan's own jade cup. After Jamuka and Ong Khan helped recover Temujin's wife, the sworn brothers exchanged gifts once more, this time gold belts and horses. By day, the men drank wine from the same cup, and at night slept under the same blanket. Hot. I don't know how metaphorical that is. Cool. Their tribes, however, were eventually forced to take different directions in the search for fresh pasture, and the two men were separated. But both tribes flourished, and their loyalty endured. It was natural that he should wish for his anda to be honored as well.
We don't have titles to give to all you Mongolians. How many do you think we have?
Wanyan Honglie stammered, by now half drunk. Wanyan Honglie cast his brother a meaningful look, but was ignored. Fine, give him my title instead.
The title is so little you would give it away?
Wanyan Honglie cried. Temujin stood up. Without uttering another word, he downed the contents of his cup and left. Wanyan Honglie was left to defuse the situation with some hasty and not particularly amusing jokes. The next morning, just as the sun was climbing above the horizon, Temujin mounted his horse and went to inspect the 5,000 mounted horses already lined up in formation. The Jurchen princes and their men were still sleeping. Temujin had at first been impressed by the Jurchen army. They appeared strong and well equipped. But still sleeping? Temujin snorted. Now he saw they were undisciplined and libertine. "What do you think of the Jin?" he asked Mukali. "1,000 of our men could defeat 5,000 of theirs," was Mukali's reply. "Just what I thought." "Just what I thought," Temujin said with a smile. "But they say the Jin has more than 1,000,000 men at its command. We have only 50,000.
But you can't lead 1,000,000 men into battle at once. If we were to fight them, we could take 10,000 today and another 10,000 tomorrow."
"We always agree when it comes to military strategy." Temujin patted him on the shoulder. A man weighing 100 jin can eat 10 oxen, each weighing 10,000 jin. He just needs time. They laughed. "You can't eat an elephant all at once." Also, guerrilla warfare. Wars of attrition. Strategy. Temujin pulled at his reins. Then he caught sight of his fourth son Tolui's horse without its rider. "Where is Tolui?" Tolui was only 9 years old, but Temujin treated his sons in the same way he did his troops, with an iron discipline. Anyone breaking his rules was punished. Temujin's men were uneasy. General Borokul, Tolui's mentor, was overly concerned.
"The boy never sleeps late. Let me see."
Just as he turned his horse, he saw 2 children running toward him, holding hands. The boy with a strip of brocade tied around his forehead was Tolui. The other was Guo Jing. "Father!" Tolui was excited.
"Where have you been?" Temujin demanded.
"Guo Jing and I swore an oath of brotherhood down by the river. Look, he gave me this,"
Tolui said, waving an embroidered red handkerchief Lily Li had made for her son. Temujin recalled with fondness the time he and Jamuka became sworn Anda, 2 innocent children just like those standing before him now.
"And what did you give him?"
"This," Guo Jing said, pointing to his neck, to the gold necklace Temujin's son usually wore.
"From now on you must love and look after each other," Temujin said.
They nodded.
"Now mount your horses," Temujin said. "Guo Jing is coming with us."
Because he's family now. So, that's how it works. Awesome. So, you've probably noticed that Genghis Khan is a pretty chill dude in this. He's pretty great. He's exceptionally laid back about certain things. He's like, it's some kid that my son met, and you know what? They're blood brothers now. Let's go. They've got their, he's got a code. He's got a code. The boys climbed into their saddles in excitement. After yet another hour's waiting, the Jin princes emerged from their gers, washed and dressed at last. Wanyan Honglie caught sight of the Mongolian soldiers waiting in formation, and sent a hurried order to his men to get ready. But Wanyan Hongshi believed in making the Mongolians wait, to let them know who had the power. He ate at a leisurely pace, accompanying the snacks with a few cups of wine, and then mounted his horse. It took another hour for the 10,000-strong Jin army to muster before setting off. They marched northward for 6 days until they were met with a delegation sent by Ong Khan, consisting of the Khan's son Sengum and his adopted son Jamuka. When word reached Temujin that his sworn brother was up ahead, he galloped on. The 2 men jumped from their horses and embraced. Temujin's sons followed close behind to greet their uncle. Jamuka was tall and spindly, Wanyan Honglie observed, his upper lip decorated with the finest threads of gold. His eyes were quick. Sengum, in contrast, was pale and flabby, no doubt from having lived a life of opulence. He looked nothing like the men hewn by the harsh climate of the steppe. He was haughty and showed a noticeable disregard for the great Khan. Together they rode on again for another day. Then, just as they were approaching Ong Khan's camp, two of Temujin's advance guards came riding back. The Naiman are blocking the way ahead, some 30,000 of them.
What do they want?
Wanyan Honglie was anxious after hearing the translation.
To fight, it would seem.
They've really brought 30,000 men?
Wanyan Honglie stuttered.
Aren't we outnumbered?
Temujin did not wait for Wanyan Honglie to finish. Turning to Mukali, he said, Find out what's going on. Find out what's going on. I got wrong who was talking to whom there. I apologize. Mukali rode on with 10 bodyguards, while the rest of the entourage waited. He was back before long.
The Naiman say that since the great Jin Empire granted a title to our Khan, the princes should bestow one on them too. If your excellencies don't, they will take you hostage until such a title is forthcoming. Not only that, they want a rank of higher status than that given to our great Khan Temujin.
Demanding a title?
Wanyan Hongshi's cheeks had gone pale.
That's sedition! What should we do?
Wanyan Honglie started organizing his troops into their fighting positions as a precaution.
Brother, Jamuka said, turning to Temujin, the Naiman frequently steal our livestock and harass our people. Are we really going to let them get away with this? What do your excellencies want us to do?
Temujin had by now surveyed the terrain and concocted a plan.
Let's show the princes how we do things here on the steppe.
Temujin let out a cry and cracked his whip twice. 5,000 Mongolians howled in response, startling the Jin princes. Up ahead, the Naiman were approaching.
Brother, Wanyan Honglie said, order our men to charge. These Mongols don't know how to fight.
Let them go first,
Wanyan Honglie whispered. Realizing his brother's intentions, Wanyan Honglie nodded. The Mongolian soldiers howled again, but still they did not move.
Why are they howling like animals?
Wanyan Honglie said.
Shouting alone isn't going to make them turn back.
Borokul was positioned on the left flank. He turned to Tolui, who along with his sworn brother Guo Jing had joined his voice with the other men.
Follow me and don't fall behind. Watch and learn.
Just then, enemy soldiers appeared through the dust up ahead. Still the Mongols howled. Still they did not move. Wanyan Honglie was growing more and more anxious. The Naiman were fierce and might attack at any moment. Fire! The first row of Jin men released several rounds of arrows, but the Naiman were still beyond reach. They were charging at speed toward them. Wanyan Honglie began to panic, his heart thudding.
Why don't we just give them what they want? He said to his brother. We can make up some title, something high-ranking. It doesn't matter. It wouldn't cost us anything.
With 2 cracks of Temujin's whip, the Mongols fell silent and split into 2 flanks. Temujin and Jamuka each took one. Leaning low in their saddles, they galloped toward higher ground on either side, calling orders to their men as they rode. The riders split off into small groups as they ascended, covering all positions. Now they had the height to their advantage. They loaded their bows and held them high. The commander of the Naiman, too, looked for higher ground, but the Mongolians had erected walls made from layers of sheep's fleece to shield them from incoming arrows. The Naiman shot up at the Mongolians, but their arrows fell short or were caught up in the fleece barricades. The Mongolians returned fire, and the Naiman fell back in chaos and confusion. Temujin watched the tumult from his position high on the left.
Jelme, attack from the rear.
Armed with his saber, Jelme charged, 1,000 men behind him, and blocked the Naiman retreat. Jebe took up his spear and pressed to the front of the charge. His target was the Naiman commander-in-chief. He would kill him as an expression of gratitude to Temujin. Within moments, the Naiman rear guard fell apart, and the foremost ranks were in chaos. The Naiman commander hesitated, giving Jamuka and Sengum time to join the charge. Facing attack on all sides, the Naiman fell into disarray. Abandoned by their commander, the remaining men threw down their bows, dismounted, and surrendered. The Mongols had killed over 1,000 Naiman men, captured 2,000 more, and gained almost as many horses before the rest of the army fled. They had lost no more than 100 of their own. Temujin ordered the captives be stripped of their armor and split into 4 groups, one for the Wanyan brothers, one for his adoptive father Ong Khan, one for his sworn brother Jamuka, and one for himself. The Mongolians whose relatives had died in battle received compensation, 5 horses and 5 slaves. The battle now over, Wanyan Honglie burst into nervous laughter.
They want a title?
He said, turning to his brother.
How about Conqueror of the Northern Queller of Uprisings?
For all his brother's jokes, Wanyan Honglie was feeling decidedly nervous. The Empire would be in trouble if Temujin or Jamuka ever united the northern tribes and took command of the steppe. The Mongols were a genuine threat. He was still mulling this over when yet more dust appeared on the horizon. Another army was approaching. And that is where we will call it for the week. However, we do have a couple terms in the appendix to cover. Let's see. I think we're here. Yes, we did points of the wheel from the I Ching, however that's pronounced. That gets us up to that one. Okay, so index time. And like I said, I'm not going to keep whipping over to the index midway through. So if any terminology is good, what I could do is do the index first, so it's in your head. But I don't always know what page I'm going to be able to get up to. So, oh boy. Jing Ke or Nie Zheng. Jing Ke and Nie Zheng were ancient assassins who in the popular mind are known for their righteous self-sacrifice and loyalty, because they carried out their work though it meant certain death for themselves. Nie Zheng was known for his filial piety, taking care of his mother until her death, before following through on his promise to assassinate the political enemy of his patron and kill himself in turn. Their stories were collected by the ancient historian Sima Qian in his Biographies of the Assassins. Next term is ger. Literally home in Mongolian, ger also refers to the characteristically round, portable tents covered in felts and animal skins that housed nomads across the steppes of Central Asia. More commonly known in English by the Turkish name yurt, a reference to the round imprint left in the grass when the tent is moved. Yurt alert! Next term, banner of white horsehair. In this instance, banner does not refer to a flag made from cloth, but rather a long pole with a crown of horsehair hanging from its top. The white banner was used to announce peace, the black in battle to declare war. Later, the banners were to become administrative and military divisions under the Manchu Qing dynasty. Next term is the Taichi Yud. The Taichi Yud were rivals of the Naiman and described as bitter enemies of Genghis Khan in The Secret History of the Mongols, a text written for the royal household. There are people who bear the clan name to this day in Mongolia, Inner Mongolia, and the Republic of Kalmykia. Next term is kumis. Kumis is a mildly alcoholic fermented drink traditional to the Central Asian steppes, made from sheep's milk. Whistling arrow. Whistling arrows have a hollow, bulbous head which creates a shrill sound when the arrow is fired. They were primarily used to relay messages and warnings in battle. And finally, the Naiman. The Naiman were a tribe from western Mongolia. It is claimed that many Naiman were Nestorian Christians descended from the biblical Magi, but there is no archaeological evidence to support the idea that they were in fact Christian in this period, which is the 1600s, I believe, I think is where we're at. The Naiman later converted to Buddhism and Islam. Their Khanate was destroyed by the Mongols, and the people fled and spread across the Mongol Empire. So, that's your elder Chinese history. Let me just double check the time period here. Make sure I'm not losing my mind. Oh, it might actually be even older than the 1600s. I don't know why I have the 1600s in my head. This was made clear at some point. But I can't remember where it was made clear when this is happening. Not that it's meant to be historically super accurate, but it's like, it gives you an idea. Anyway, hope people enjoyed. It was a bit rougher than I would have liked, but c'est la vie. Can't be perfect every time, and it's been a long week. It's actually been a really long month. But anyway, to anyone tuning in for the first time, I do these every week. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I'm reading something. Mondays are Mecha Mondays, where I do something giant robot related or mecha adjacent. Right now, we're doing a read through of Waldo, Genius in Orbit by Robert Heinlein, which is kind of foundational to the whole mecha concept in terms of using mechanical manipulators to move things around. Wednesdays are, for at least the time being, are Wuxia Wednesdays, where we're reading right now Legend of the Condor Heroes, Book 1, A Hero Born by Jin Yong or Louis Cha, depending on which name you prefer. One was the pen name, one is his given name, and I can't actually remember which one is which. I think Louis Cha is the pen name, and Jin Yong is his given name, but I might be misremembering. So that's what we were just listening to. And then on Fridays are free read Fridays, where I read short stories and indeed entire novels aloud. Right now we are coming up on this Friday will be the penultimate installment of the Hyperion Cantos by Dan Simmons. After that, we've got one more, and then that's done. Which is the one of the more involved undertakings I've done thus far, other than this year being the year where every single stream I do is a reading stream. Just kind of to see if I can do it. We're 4.5 months in, and I'm not gonna lie, it's pretty hard, but mostly just keeping character voices in my head week after week. More than anything else. So if those have started to get repetitive, or the fact that I'm changing them like a week out, there's reasons for that. It's because I'm forgetting, or I decide I don't like the voice because I'm having to wing it a bit more than I usually do. So yeah, that's about it. After we finish with the Hyperion Cantos, I might do a break where I read like a short story collection by Greg Egan. I've got a couple of those left. Did I do Oceanic? I think I did Oceanic already. It was either Oceanic or Luminous. No, I'm pretty sure I did Oceanic. So I would do Instantiation probably, which has some pretty out there stories, as I recall. Some pretty good stuff in there. And then we will get cracking on doing trade-offs between the Destination Void series by Frank Herbert and guy whose name I can't remember off the top of my head. Look, Bill Ransom. Bill Ransom, and reading the Three Body Problem trilogy by Shijin Liu. So look forward to that, because I committed to doing those a while back, and now I'm going to get them done. I have to go look at my master document for stuff that people have requested, so I can start prioritizing which of those to read and start getting done. Doing the trade-offs for those two series is going to take much of the year for Free Read Fridays. I'm going to see how long it takes me to get through. I don't know what I'm going to do for Wuxia Wednesdays. I'll probably get through the first book in the Legends of the Condor Heroes series, and then probably just do short stories for a while or something. I don't know. I haven't figured that out. Mecha Mondays, we've got a couple more streams for Waldo. I haven't decided what I'm going to do after that. We'll figure it out. My work schedule has been interesting of late, so I'm having to wing things a lot more than I have had to do. Hence the, I think, general decrease in quality of streams, if I'm totally honest. But anyway, thanks again for tuning in. Thank you, Warren Steele, for tuning in, and to you, Diggs BTW1. If you're not catching them live, they're all uploaded on the YouTube channel. I'll get every month at least. I update at a minimum every month. I get the playlists updated so that everything is where it should be located. Otherwise, you have to hunt for it, and it's a pain in the rear. And I know that. But other than that, have a good one. Stay safe, stay sane, and be decent to each other. Sees y'all next time. And yeah, become a martial hero or something. That'd be pretty cool. Genghis Khan, kinda chill, shockingly.